This is visiting assistant Professor Katica Bronco from Croatia. Welcome to lesson 8 of module 4 of our intermediate Tsql course, TRIGGERS. This web-based lesson will focus on multi-trigger sequences. That is, defining the order of firing for up to 3 triggers on a single table. This will significantly assist us in creating triggers for the business scenarios we discussed in prior lessons. By the end of this lesson, you'll be equipped with the knowledge to effectively implement and manage multi-sequence triggers within your SQL Server environment. Let's get started. Take it away, Professor Grumpy.
Okay, thank you, Visiting Assistant Professor Katica Bronco. And she'll be teaching some of our future modules. So let's give her a big welcome. And now the topics. Well, multi-trigger sequence. Okay, so we're forging ahead in this module. And this lesson will be a fairly quick one, but we're going to set up a nice demo to execute up to 3 triggers on one table. And we'll be able to control the sequence in which they fire off. So let's dive right in. Let's look at the critical code that will define the sequence of the triggers, and then we'll dive right into our demo. Okay, let's take a look at how to set up these multi-trigger sequence events, I guess we'll call them. And you can define 2 or 3, but not more than 3 triggers that fire one right after the other, and whatever you define the order. And it's really simple, right? You create your triggers, and then the protagonist, if I can use that term of this little scenario, is a stored procedure called set trigger order, a very appropriate name. And you just pass it the trigger name, the order. So in this case, we're typing out first, and the type, an insert trigger. We did supply the name, a test name, which we'll see in the demo, multi-trigger test 1. Okay, the namespace is equal to null, so server or a database. So in this case, it's going to, basically be on a table in the database. And then we have another trigger, multi-trigger test 3. All right, so we just define the order as last, and it's also insert, although it could be something else. So in this case, we're only defining the firing sequence for 2 triggers, right? Trigger test 1 and test 3. But we'll see how to do 3 triggers in our lab. So let's get right into it.
Grab a cup of coffee, gang. Here comes our next demo. Take it away, Professor Grumpy.
Okay, as usual, we need to do just a little housekeeping here before we proceed with the demo. Make sure we're in the test database. And we're going to have to set up, I think it's a couple of test tables here that we're going to use. One's called multiple trigger test. And as usual, it's pretty familiar. Just insert a message, the message time, and the transaction type. So let's just create that if it's not there already. Then we need to create another one called trigger transaction test. This time it has a transaction ID, a client ID, a transaction date, amount, and a transaction type. So maybe a little bit more of a robust table that looks like a sales table. So let's just create this. So we'll create our first trigger. Okay, I'll just breeze through these because they're very basic and you should be familiar with all of this. It's called a multi-trigger test 1 trigger on that trigger transaction test table, and it's a 4 insert trigger. And we insert into the multiple trigger test table a message, values insert trigger firing, a multiple trigger test 1, then the date and the insert, And we also print out the message. Okay, so far so good. I'm not checking for syntax. I guess I should, but hopefully there isn't any. So multi-trigger test 3, not 2 now, test 3. We'll create 2 later. Okay, it's basically the same thing. We're just going to insert into that multiple trigger test table the message that multi-trigger test 3 is firing off with the date and time and the message insert. Okay, so let's create this one, create or alter. You can use whichever form you like, create or alter, or delete the trigger first if it exists and then recreate it. All right, now we need to set the sequence. So we'll come up with a little batch here. Okay, declare a trigger name. So we initialize the trigger name variable to multi-trigger test 1. And there we go. We use the SP set trigger order, stored procedure, system stored procedure. We pass it the trigger name, the order, it's going to be first. The statement type is an insert, and the namespace we leave to null. Okay, so let's just create this. Actually, we should create these both in one go here. We'll do multi-trigger test 3.2 in the same manner. Little 2-command batch. Okay, here we go. Taking a little bit of time. For some reason, my little laptop here is a little slow today. So let's take it on a test run. I have another batch here. We declare the counter variable, an integer data type, and then the transaction date, time. We truncate those 2 tables. We'll set our counter to 1. Set transaction date to get date. Print the transaction date, and then we just go into a little while loop here. So while counter is less than or equal to 10, we'll set the transaction date by adding an hour to it. We're doing a little simulation to it, passing it the counter, the date, and then we'll insert into the trigger transaction test table transaction 00, customer 01, then the transaction date, a value of 100 plus a counter, and then deposit. So a little banking application, actually. So we increment the counter by 1. All right, so let's let this run and see what happens. Okay, there it goes. That was pretty quick. Let's take a look at the messages here. So we see that 1 and 3 is firing in sequence. That's a good indication. Okay. So again, very basic test, but make sure you understand it. All right, because our next lesson will be a little harder. So we check out the results. Let's look at the multiple trigger test table. There's all those messages that everything fired off. As you can go look at it when you're testing, you have these kind of test tables. Make sure everything works as expected. And then let's look at that trigger transaction test table. So we have all these deposits. Right, it's just a little simulation, but we did set up that sequence correctly. So now let's set up another trigger, multi-trigger test 2, just like the other ones. Okay, we'll insert into the multi-trigger test table again. That multi-trigger test 2 is now firing off. Okay, so I think you know what's going to happen. We'll just take this little test, we'll take it for a test spin again. Basically the same batch. We're just going to insert another 10 rows or so. There they go. Okay, so now we see, look at that, we see that test 1, test 2, test 3, they executed in sequence. Okay, that's pretty good. So final check. Okay, there it is, 1, 2, 3. As you can see, the triggers are firing off in sequence, the time. And let's look at our test transaction table. You got all these deposits. So that's it. So that's how multi-trigger sequences are defined. Very easy. So hopefully you won't find the homework too challenging. So let's just continue and wrap up this lesson.
Hello, this is visiting assistant Professor Katica. Please define 3 triggers on a table called ORDER line. The first trigger checks the customer's credit rating. If the rating is high, let's say 90 to 100, offer the customer a 10 discount. If the credit rating is low, a patch surcharge will be applied to the order. The second trigger checks the number of items available in inventory and compares them to the number the customer ordered. If items are in stock, mark the line item for the order as in STOCK, PROCESSED. If the items are not in stock, mark the order line as BACKORDERED. Create all supporting tables, such as CUSTOMR, ORDER, credit rating, and product. Define the multi-sequence for this business scenario and enable the trigger firing order. If you are unsure about how to code this, refer to the homework template to get started and review the lesson.
Okay, we wrapped up another one, a multi-trigger sequence. Okay, we covered 8 lessons in this module so far, and there's only 3 more to go. We did a simple lab, multi-trigger sequence lab or demo. Okay, this feature is really very important for implementing a business logic, and we're going to see this in our next lesson. So I hope you did your homework, and I hope you understand how to implement multiple triggers that fire off one after the other. Okay, so if you need a review, make sure you go back. And once again, I need to stress that doing the homework is very important. Okay, let's wrap up this lesson. Okay, this was an easy lesson, but there's more in module 9, or I should say lesson 9. We're going to do an inventory case study, so it's going to be a pretty interesting business scenario that we'll look at it, and there'll be a lot of triggers that need to be defined. And yes, the homework should be a doozy, as they used to say in the old grumpy days. So see you in the next lesson.